Hi everybody, I'm Stuart Elliott. I'm the editor-in-chief of The Real Deal, and I'd like to welcome you to our panel today. It's only 45 minutes, so let's get settled in and get started. So we wrote a story the other day about a Chinese investor completely through texting and never seeing the apartment, buying a $13 million condo in a new development in Midtown, the Baccarat. With those kinds of buys, you realize it's definitely a great time for New York City real estate. Developers are asking for sky-high prices today. The market's on an upswing. The first quarter showed a 30% rise in prices compared to the same time last year. But how long is it going to go on? It really depends upon a key component of the market today, foreign buyers. It's interesting to think that 2 decades ago, when there weren't condos sprouting up on every street corner, there really wasn't a place for foreign buyers to park their money here. Co-ops with their strict rules weren't an option. And some experts say that 1/5 of all home purchases in Manhattan today are foreign buyers, and it's a hard number to pin down. The world has been in political upheaval between the Arab Spring, meltdowns in the EU, Russia's desire to expand, seismic changes in India and China, and that means more money possibly fleeing the safety of New York City real estate. So how deep is that pool of foreign buyers, and who are the big players now, and what are they doing? Who are the next big players? That's what we're here to find out today. So let me briefly introduce our panelists and get to it. Leonard Steinberg. Raise your hand, Leonard. Leonard heads the #2 team at the biggest brokerage firm in New York City, Douglas Elliman. He's doing tons of deals downtown, including a lot of new condo projects in Chelsea and the Village. He's also one of the best-dressed brokers on the scene today. Welcome, Leonard. At the far corner, we have Adam Modlin. Adam founded one of the top boutique brokerages in the city, the Modlin Group, 15 years ago. He counts a lot of celebrities as clients, including some Yankees and some supermodels. And he just did a $20 million deal involving talk show host Kelly Ripa. And he's also an impeccable dresser. So for aspiring agents out there, it's a clear lesson. You dress the part. As an editor, nobody has any expectations on how I dress, and the bar is very low for journalists, but if you're an agent, obviously, take a cue. Richard Steinberg. Richard is based on the Upper East Side at Warburg Realty. In his more than 2-decade career at Warburg, he has been either the top or #2 broker every single year. That's consistency. He was a cast member of the real estate reality TV show Selling New York for 15 minutes. And he's also a doctor. He's also a doctor in real life. That was before selling real estate. He just doesn't play one on TV. He's an actual doctor. Finally, Steve Kliegerman. Steve is president of Halstead Property Development Marketing, and he's built it into one of the most active new development divisions in the city. It's a force in marketing new condos and rentals far and wide, Harlem, Brooklyn, all over Manhattan. Welcome, Steve. So my first question, and anyone can pick this up, are foreign buyers at this point getting turned off by high per square foot prices? I mean, you have $6,000 a square foot, $5,000 a square foot, or is New York City still a bargain compared to other world cities?
Well, I think there is a tremendous focus on the very, very high end of any of these transactions. And if I hear one more time a seller speaking to me about this illustrious Russian oligarch who's going to step out of the shadows and spend $100 million on their apartment that's probably worth a lot less, I shudder. But the answer is that there is a global economy right now that is producing a level of wealth around the world that is pretty phenomenal. And population growth in itself is enough of an engine to push that growth forward. And by doing so, you create new wealth, and new wealth in countries that have political instability traditionally look towards America and the United Kingdom for safety zones for their cash, as well as for pied-à-terre homes. But I do think there is a market for very high-priced real estate. I think there are certain areas in this city that are experiencing a little bit of oversupply, but I do believe over time that can be absorbed by the level of growth that we are seeing in the wealth creation.
And what do you see in terms of like per square foot prices in other global cities? I was reading in one place that in London you're seeing per square foot prices of $6,000 a square foot for new construction on average, I think here it's still below $2,000 a square foot, although a lot of projects are higher than that. But do you have any comparisons from that point of view?
I think, first of all, I think right now in New York City proper, 2,500 a square foot is about the entry point right now for almost anything that's considered luxury new development. I mean, we're seeing numbers in London, Leonard, at $10,000, $12,000 a square foot on the upper end of the marketplace. But you have to remember also that the London marketplace has a little bit different allure because of the tax consequences. I mean, a lot of Middle Eastern money goes into London because when you go out of London, you don't pay taxes. If you do the same thing here in New York, you're paying a lot of taxes. So a lot more, I think that market's been driven up tremendously by the foreign marketplace, and they have a far greater percentage of foreign buyers than we do here.
And when you're talking about global cities competing with New York, I mean, is it really London far and away that's the biggest competition? Or are there others that are in the top 2 or 3?
I want to say, first of all, could it be any hotter in here? Could it be any hotter? I'm dying. I think Leonard made the best point. I don't know if any of you are following the art auctions at Sotheby's and Christie's. They had, I think it was 5 or 6 lots that sold for over $20 million, which was unprecedented. And I think it's exactly what Leonard said. You have these foreign countries that have unstable economies. What is the most stable economy in the world? It's the United States. So they're not looking at it as a purchase of a property, as they are looking at it as parking their money in a more stable economy and knowing that it will appreciate exactly the same way that the art market is. And those same buyers in the art market are the same buyers, in my opinion, the foreign. Because of those, I think I read in the New York Times, of those 6 lots that went over $20 million, 5 of those 6 were to the Asian countries.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing.
I also think there's a huge mistake being made right now in the real estate market, and I have to tell you, it's an ongoing trauma in my life to see how the real estate industry averages things, and these averages are really meaningless. When we talk about the average price per square foot, what are we really talking about? I think there are numerous classifications within every real estate market in every city. And in New York, when we talk about averages, I sometimes laugh. Because if we were to say the average tech stock trades at $36 today, we'd be laughed at.
Right.
So the real estate industry's data collection is that of another era, and there's a tremendous opportunity going forward to create something that is really data that has meaning. The data we're using right now is actually kind of bad.
I think that's the hardest thing about real estate, because all real estate's local, but you have to sum up the market somehow, so you always get these overgeneralizations about the market, and you can't write a market report about every block in the city, so it gets tricky. But that leads me to my next question. Are foreign buyers' comfort levels changing in terms of where they're buying? How many more foreign buyers do you see in Midtown versus other areas of the city like the Village? Maybe Adam or Leonard, you can answer that since you guys do so much downtown.
Sure. I think that the foreign market has a certain connection and affiliation that has been for over 100 years to Central Park. So the most foreign buyers that I see and some of my colleagues are in neighborhoods that surround Central Park and have a view. And in particular in the new construction, and I would say that the epicenter of that obviously today is between 57th and 59th Street.
What do they say when you take those buyers downtown in Tribeca, the Village? They just don't get it, or what's the difference?
My experience is that the neighborhoods, including Tribeca and the West Village, for example, those neighborhoods are really a lot to do with the energy and the character of the neighborhood. And they're less to do with amenities, lifestyle, and views, which have been the top criteria for the foreign buyer.
And they just don't have the same flash, I suppose?
I have a problem still with this average. Where's this foreign buyer is being lumped into one person, and I think a foreign buyer from Brazil is so very different to a buyer from London or Paris or Beijing. And I think it's a real misnomer when people tell me, this apartment is perfect for this person. Well, theoretically, potentially that may be so, but the reality is real estate is about matchmaking. And every human being in every country has their own distinctive personalities and cultural characteristics, but even within those, there are variables that are pretty astounding. And I do think downtown often attracts people from uptown and vice versa, where they wouldn't necessarily automatically appear to be that profile.
And Leonard, you were telling me before about, one project downtown. I don't know if you're marketing it, but 56 Leonard, that's a building that's generating a little bit more foreign interest because it is a little bit more flashy. That's the Jenga-like tower building that's rising.
Well, I think if I'm a buyer heading into Beijing today, which I really don't know at all, I would want to go in there and find some incredible comfort zone. But if I spoke to a local broker or a local individual, they might explain to me an element of Beijing that I don't understand yet. So I believe 56 Leonard's success was, number one, an architect that's internationally recognizable. Herzog de Meuron is a name that people really resonate with. And I think, more importantly, it delivers a whole wave of services and amenities that are of this international level right now. I think real estate has transitioned itself to a point where sameness throughout the world is a comfort zone, especially for big money. And 56 Leonard Street is a combination of investors, international buyers, and local buyers. The problem is, everyone says something today and it becomes fact. The reality of it is we don't know the profile of these buyers and exactly where they came from and exactly what their use of these apartments are because we have something called New York state law that prevents us from profiling them. Right. So it's working for us and against us.
But I think that, I do want to say, I think that we need to be really clear. There are two distinct, in my opinion, foreign buyers. You have this $1 million to $3 or $4 million buyer who's buying it maybe to rent it out for a year or two, or to have maybe a family member who's going to NYU or Columbia, and then they plan 3 years down the road of using it themselves. And that's really, in my experience, the $1, $3, $4 million buyer. And then you have the other extremely wealthy foreign buyer who's buying at 157 or who's buying at 432 Park. And that is a distinctly different type of foreign buyer. So I just think there are two types, and you need to isolate which one you're directing your energy to.
I agree. There's the trophy property, and then there's the more equity preservation, investment property, or their children are coming to school here, or they're buying an apartment for their children to occupy while they go to school here and preserve equity. We saw also buyer trends where particularly the Asian community latches onto a project. 540 West 49th Street and the Adeline at 23 West 116th for us were great examples of that. We were on the market about 2 months, and we started to see our first Asian buyers. And all of a sudden, for the next 3 weeks, almost every appointment that got booked was Chinese buyers buying a lot for their either adult children who are going to school here or looking for something that they can rent out and have some equity preservation. And it came in waves. Right. Different than the 157 property, a buyer coming in at $50–80 million, where that's a vanity buy, and that's trying to get a lot of cash out of a country that is in flux.
See, I'm going to disagree. I'm sorry. I think there aren't two classifications of international buyers. I actually think there are probably about 5 or 6, possibly more, because what happens is, just like everything else, we talk about the $1 to $3 million, and they're kind of like the poor rich. And then we talk about the really rich, and they have $50 to $100 million. And frankly, just like society, we're completely ignoring the middle. And the middle is important, the middle is neglected, and the middle isn't that sexy. So people aren't that excited to talk about them, but it's a massive, massive part of the market, and it's very neglected.
Right. Kind of speaking to that, there was a recent report that said that Chinese are now the biggest overseas buyers in Manhattan. To your point, Leonard, how deep is that buying pool, these Chinese investors or end users that come over and are buying, $2 or $3 million places? Is it tens of thousands of people? Is it thousands?
I think the answer, going back to a comment Leonard made, is that we have the Fair Housing Act, and so there is no official data that documents how many buyers are foreign and what percentages and in what price ranges. And that everything that we hear and read about and discuss amongst our friends and colleagues is all anecdotal. So when an Asian buyer buys a full floor at 157 for $55 million, there's a story written about it, there's blogs that are written about it, and that takes over the universe. And it's really only an anomaly. It's one sale into itself. It's not necessarily a market segment. It's not about how deep that buyer pool may be. It's just a one-off sale. And that most of the sales that are taking place are not sexy and don't attract any media attention, so it's not written about and we don't talk about it.
You know, it's funny. Perception is reality. If I hear one more time about the BRIC countries, I don't know, maybe Leonard and Adam are selling all the Brazilians and the Indians, because I don't see anyone from India buying. I don't see a huge amount of people from Brazil buying. I do see Russia and China. So I guess they're, you know, working with these guys, and I just don't see them.
And you ask how deep the market is. We're actually working with, from what I believe, is the first 2 mainland Chinese developers that are developing here in New York. And their representatives are telling us that back in China, they have lists of tens of thousands of people who want to invest in New York real estate and in real estate in America in general. They're also looking at California. They're looking at New York. They're starting to look at Florida again. You know, sorry?
Vancouver.
Vancouver, absolutely. Vancouver. You know, so they're giving us a lot of information about a huge amount of buyers that want to, but it's a very difficult process. It's not like they're just getting their money out of there today, but they have a lot of people who are looking to, you know, move equity over here.
I also think probably the most potent foreign buyer in all of New York right now is the foreign buyer who just happens to not live in New York, because we think it's New York and everything else. But the reality is California, other parts of this country, is where I'm finding some of the best foreign buyers, because as much as all this wealth creation is happening outside of the United States, let's not forget that the United States is investing and financing a lot of that growth.
I've taken 3 trips to Shanghai, and I mean, I've made some deals, but not a significant amount, because at the end of the day, it's a cultural difference. I was not brought up there. I don't know the way that the business works, and I find that on our 3rd trip, we had to hook up with a Chinese firm and offer them a 50-50 split. That's how we worked it. We came and brought the product. They came with those lists. You're 100% right. Thousands of lists of people. And we split whatever we made 50-50 with them. And we had more success on our 3rd trip than we did the first 2, because we tried to do it ourselves the first 2 times.
So that'd be essentially like you would be working for half commission on those developments?
What we did is we went to developers and we said, you want to sell your product, why wait for the Chinese or the Russians to come to you? Let's go to them. You need to give us an overseas exclusive and say we are the exclusive broker for your product. And then we found an affiliate or someone that was a very large firm that matched our profile in China, and they had an office in Shanghai and Beijing, and we had expos. We literally rented out the ballroom of the Shanghai Hilton, and we set up shop for 3 days, and we brought materials we used 5 developers. We brought poster boards and floor plans and offering plans, and we took reservations. And we found that we were most successful on the 3rd trip when we had them bring their buyers rather than us advertising by ourselves.
And what are the obstacles and roadblocks to getting the money over here and getting the deal done in a situation like that? Are they pretty considerable?
I mean, from what I've been told, and we haven't done the transactions yet, but like at 421 Kent Avenue, which is being done by a Chinese developer, we've got about a dozen or so buyers already who have committed to buying, and you know, they are going through an intermediary to bring their money here.
Well, they have to, because there is a Chinese law, and I could be, please don't quote me on this, I'm not sure the exact, but I think they're only allowed to take $20,000 out per year, per, how many? 50. So it's 50,000. So when they buy a $1 million property, they need to find 20 of their relatives and friends that will each wire $50,000 into the account. So it's really very, very complicated. Who knew on my first trip? I mean, I didn't know any of this stuff.
It is complicated. You've heard grumblings from the real estate industry about the de Blasio administration, and you know, it might have a chilling effect on real estate, and so is that something that's even on foreign buyers' radar? I mean, how cognizant are they of the political landscape here, or how much do they know of what's going on? I suppose obviously it differs, you know, depending on the investor, but overall.
I think you said it. It differs on the investor. It differs on who's counseling them. It differs on how well educated they are in the marketplace. I think in general, I'm sure we've all been asked over the last month or two, how we think that some of the de Blasio administration's new policies are going to affect the real estate market in general. And I think the answer is we don't know yet because nothing's been implemented. It's only a dream right now.
Well, I think the most important thing de Blasio did implement, and I'm a big critic of his and a big supporter, I kind of do both. De Blasio did the most important thing to this city by putting in a really tough police commissioner. That is the most important element to any city. If the crime goes up, which everyone threatened it would go soaring under his administration, and it hasn't. In fact, it is being reduced. That, to me, is number one. So I think he gets credit for doing 1 through 10, actually, on the list, and after that, all the other stuff will fall in place. But a city like Manhattan or New York, without discipline, is a city in chaos and a city in decline. And the fact that he put in a commissioner who's tough, who actually didn't get all the credit he was due to him from the Giuliani administration, I think that is number 1, 2, 3 through 10 on the list of important things that he did, and for that he deserves a tremendous amount of credit.
I think with the Domino Sugar deal, he's allowing them to build taller in exchange for more affordable units. I think that's something the industry is not upset about. I mean, I think that was seen as a pretty good deal for real estate. How do you reach these groups? I mean, Richard, you touched on that. How important is social media and new media in reaching this group, or reality TV? Are we going to see a surge in Chinese buyers when $1 Million Listing New York goes in syndication in China, for example?
It's people ask me, how do I get to the next level in selling? And it's really about branding yourself, and it's not about reality TV, as it is any other way of branding yourself. Pretty much firms do very much the same thing. You want someone to get up in the morning and say, who's that guy I saw on the ad, or who's that guy that I saw on television, or who's that guy? Yeah, let's call him, because out of sight is out of mind. So I think that, I know the guys from $1 Million Listings. Frederick, he's huge on Instagram and Twitter. I don't do that because I'm not technologically savvy like that, but those guys do it that way very effectively. I mean, I was lucky enough to be asked to do the show. That's very effective. Leonard has my last name. That's why he does very well.
It helps. Everything helps.
And Adam has, all the celebrities and the professional athletes. So, you just got to find your niche that makes you comfortable, and you got to promote yourself and your brand.
And how do you do it, Adam? This is the first time I've talked to Adam on the record. He's so elusive and under the radar.
I thought you said this was off the record.
Oh, oops. I forgot these people were coming.
Everyone asks me every day about the television shows that feature New York real estate brokers. And the first thing that comes to mind is, while anyone who's doing a TV show is filming, I'm closing deals. And I'm probably taking business from them. So my first thing always has to do with integrity and privacy. And that's how I've been able to develop the business where I am today and still continue growing every day. But for me personally, TV is not a format that I would ever explore. There's no clients that I have that would ever work with me if I was on a television show. So for me, I think it's back to the basics, is work hard, don't cut corners, get up earlier than your peer and stay up later, work harder, provide a great service, hone your craft, be an expert in the business, be knowledgeable, take good care of your customers, and they'll recommend you to their friends. And if you happen to stumble upon a foreign buyer and you do a good job with them, it'll open up a whole world of foreign buyers for you.
I shudder when I look at some of these reality TV shows. Not yours. I actually think Open House New York is actually okay. But I shudder to think that as an American society, we're kind of accepting of Jerry Springer-style antics on television. But I wonder about some of these other sophisticated cultures outside of America when they see this clowning around and insanity, some of which is potentially, probably illegal. Secondly, just makes our industry look so rotten. I think that reality TV is certainly effective for some brokers, but for the industry, I think it's taken us back 20 years, and I hope to fight that over the next few years to get our reputations back, because I think it's been terribly damaging. But people watch it everywhere.
And just as a disclaimer, my best friend actually directs Jerry Springer, so.
Which was classic compared to what we have now.
Absolutely. You know, you ask how you reach the foreign buyer, and it depends on which foreign buyer you're really looking to reach, because the European countries, I find that social media and online advertising and marketing, if done well and done in the right venues, is effective. For the Chinese marketplace, as Richard said, you really need a partner there. They need to understand the culture. Obviously, social media is somewhat managed in China, so you don't reach people the same way as you normally would. If you're marketing to the South American countries, it's wholly different. We have worked with partners who have offices in South America, in different countries, in Argentina, in Brazil, but we find those buyers find us much more easily. Typically, also, there's obviously a much larger language barrier with the Chinese buyer, typically. A lot of times, though, what we also do find is the buyer may have a local friend, family member here who's acting as a representative.
Does that make it confusing as far as who's buying?
I need to say one thing
Sure.
about reality TV. I'm sorry, but you know, I think anything can be taken to the extreme, and I do agree with you guys to a certain extent. But I want you to think about this. We're calling this reality TV today. There is no better person in real estate, and I think in my own person, or marketer or brander, than Donald Trump. And so when you think about wasn't Donald doing reality TV 15 years ago? Wasn't 10 years ago Donald doing reality TV? You can call it a different name, but it was reality TV, and you might not like his technique or what he did, but you certainly have to give the gentleman credit as being one of the hugest marketers and branders and innovators, I think, in real estate.
But he wasn't throwing drinks in other people's faces.
I think selling New York, the show you were on, Richard.
Look, I do think, and one last thing, selling New York is not $1 million.
I was going to say, that's more like PBS, $1 million listings more like Fox.
I agree. I think there's one forgotten
I like both of them, by the way.
There's one forgotten aspect in this whole equation that I think we haven't touched on yet. And to me, the best way to reach the foreign buyer is through our amazing brokerage community in Manhattan, in New York. There is a phenomenal group of brokers here who have spectacular relationships with the buyers who come in from out of town, who maybe don't even live here yet. And I've always found that dealing with the brokers here who can act as a third party to liaise to these buyers is, in my opinion, the most effective way of communicating with them.
Some other groups who are buying here, Leonard, you mentioned this in a story that we ran in The Real Deal a couple months ago. You mentioned there's even some buying from Nigeria and South Africa, where you're from, and Mexico. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, again, we've lumped everyone into the BRIC countries, but the reality is there are a few other countries in between. And a lot of times the money is positioned in other parts because these days connecting from one city to the next is merely picking up one of these here. So it's a very interconnected world, and we've had sales to people from the Middle East who just happen to be living in Switzerland. We've been selling to French people who are actually Americans moving back to the United States. So it's a very, very mixed bag, and I think there's wealth being created throughout the world. There always will be, but now more so than ever because the markets have opened up so globally that today when you are selling a product in Cape Town, South Africa, for instance, in the past, you were selling it to Cape Town, and then maybe you went to a trade show in New York and you sold it. Today, you put it online, and the entire planet has access to your product. That's a whole new world, and I actually didn't buy into the whole social media thing until maybe 2-3 years ago, and I embrace it now because I think people talk about the millennial generation, but the reality of it is we have entered the age of the word of mouth generation. And there is a connectivity between human beings right now that is the likes of which we've never seen in our time.
How about Russian buyers today? You know, I've heard it both ways that, you know, the politics of Russia right now is inhibiting buyers from coming here. On the other hand, some people say they're still operating under the radar. What are you guys seeing? Is there any difference in the past? I know, you know, you can caveat by saying it's just a few trophy sales, but any difference?
I've had, you know, I've had a call recently because I connect to 5 other brokers around the world once a month, and we have a little dialogue session. And I have heard that in Russia right now, the Putin government, or whatever you want to call the monarchy, is telling Russians, don't take money out of this country. We need the money in this country. On the other hand, I know of massive amounts of money that are flowing out of Russia into New York right now, not as individual buyers, but as massive investors. And I'm talking hundreds of millions of dollars. So I think New York's friend, unfortunately, is political instability in other countries.
Well, I'm going back to the same thing I said in my opening statement about the art world. Why would you want, if you have a lot of wealth in Russia, why would you want to take the chance of Putin nationalizing your company on any given day for any whim that he feels he needs, and not take it out of your country? So I believe that he's probably encouraging his citizens not to take money out, but I don't think it's stopping them. I think that they're, again, putting it into the art world and into real estate because they want to take an unstable economy and they want to put it into a stable economy.
Mm-hmm. And is it hard to suss out these buyers and size up what their finances are, or if they're able to make a purchase that they're coming, that they're ostensibly going to say they want to make? I mean, is it tough to do your due diligence with these types of buyers?
Well, it's definitely tough. I mean, you have to ask for proof of funds, but there have been, I think, almost every high-end broker in the city over the last year has had at least one buyer present themselves as being a, $20, $30, $40, $50 million penthouse buyer, and then you find out that they're a fraud.
So you could be a janitor from Sheepshead Bay shows up and says, I want to buy a $50 million apartment.
We've seen a few of those where, we get the phone call one day from the lawyer saying, we're no longer representing such and such. And because the lawyer who was asked to prove the funds wasn't able to.
Well, things were getting easier with Google, where you could actually Google people and find out some research, but now in the European Union, they are allowing de-Googling, and that is an interesting new twist that just came about this week. We'll see how that plays out. But lots of dirty money out there.
And we talked about West 57th Street, and that's a street that's seeing a record tall tower, 157, built by Extel. It's going to see another record setter, again by Extel, and then another record setter by JDS, Michael Stern, who was here earlier. Basically, it's capitalizing on Central Park views. West 57th Street, I mean, as a New Yorker, that's not somewhere where I'd really necessarily head. How many foreign buyers are you seeing among the towers there? What's sort of the ratio?
I spoke to a number of those sales teams recently, and I was actually trying to do a comparison between the upper, I'll call it midtown high-rises, and the downtown new development market, and it seemed that for the most part, those sales offices were reporting to us 30 to 35% of their buyers being foreign versus downtown about 20%, as you had said earlier. So, it's almost double uptown than downtown.
Mm-hmm. And what does that mean to the fabric of the city? We kind of talked about this earlier. If you have towers that are bought by foreign buyers and they're empty for 2/3 of the year, what do you think that means? Is that a concern?
Well, I think history is a very weird thing because a lot of people say, I don't want this building in my neighborhood. That used to be a very beautiful little house. What they forgot is, in that little house, there was some lady who said, you know what, I wish this house wasn't here. This used to be beautiful farmland. So people are very selective with their history, and I think the same is to be said in buildings.
Mm-hmm. But I think for the residents in those buildings, Adam, I think it's going to be interesting because they are going to be in buildings that are potentially 1/3 or 25% vacant most of the time. You'll see a lot of lights off. It'll be great for energy conservation.
Nothing else.
Foreign buyers are great for the environment, by the way. Great.
Right. Is there a way for developers to mitigate against that, for buildings not to seem empty, Steve?
I don't think developers want to mitigate against that. And this is not a new concept for New York. If you think about some of the high-profile luxury buildings, even specifically in that neighborhood, from One Beacon Court to the Plaza to the Time Warner Center, most people who own homes in those buildings own multiple homes. They own 3, 4, 5 homes. So that New York residence, the pied-à-terre, is in many cases infrequently used. And I think in seeing brokers representing buyers and sellers and hearing presentations that brokers make when you look at these apartments, they announce it as a marketing feature that while this building, the Time Warner Center, for example, on the north side has 65 residences, on the south side 130, when you take someone in the elevator and say, well, there's 130 residences here, most people own pied-à-terres, you only will have 5 neighbors at any given time you're here. That's actually an attraction to people.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
I personally think it's a bunch of crap. I mean, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever, I don't mean that you said it, but so let me understand this. A guy's going to come in and he's going to want to spend $20 million and he's going to say, I'm only going to be here 5 days a year, and the developer's going to say, oh, I'm sorry, I can't sell it to you because the building will be too empty when you're not here. So, I mean, it's just, it's just so ridiculous because developers are in business, hopefully, to make their money in an honest and forthright way, representing themselves honestly, but they're in it to make money. They don't really give a shit who's buying the building. That's why it's a condo and not a co-op.
They're going to be on a beach in Tahiti by that time.
I also think it's a lot of hogwash because if you were to look at the average very wealthy New Yorker, they travel so intensely that chances of them being in their apartment 7 days a week, 52 weeks of the year, it's just not going to happen. So I think people just have to acknowledge the fact that we're evolving, evolution happens, and it being such a global world, we're going to be traveling to different cities. Some people will use their apartments a lot. Some might use them once a week. So be it. If you travel to the finest parts of the world, that is the case consistently.
Last question, and I'll open it up to audience questions. I talked about you guys doing due diligence on buyers. What about buyers doing due diligence on their apartments here? I mean, are you seeing people buy sight unseen, and is that a common thing, or how do they get around, spending millions?
Sight unseen makes us nervous because, especially in new development where you may be selling 6 months, 12 months, 18 months prior to occupancy, your job is only a third done when you get the contract or purchase agreement signed. Then you have to keep that buyer excited about the purchase, and they have to close. And sight unseen deals make me nervous because I've seen too many sight unseen deals go bad. Once the buyer comes in, they never saw it before. They come in, they didn't like it, and walking away from 10 or 20% deposit for most of these people at that point is nothing. So we always stress that the buyer can make an offer sight unseen. They can take a purchase agreement sight unseen, but they have to see the property before they close.
Oh, wow.
Before they sign.
You won't let them?
If my client wants to,
right.
They can, but we urge them not to.
Interesting.
Actually, the largest closing of 2013 last year was a property we sold at 144 Duane Street, sight unseen.
That was a townhouse? Yeah. Right. Questions from the audience? Anybody? Yes, right there.
Well, I can tell you, on my 3 trips overseas, we had, it was a Chinese American. We went to China. It was an American-born Chinese lawyer who gave them the level of comfort. The other thing that we had to have was an accountant who was able to discuss this $50,000 per person and how they were going to transfer funds and how they could work that. They also wanted to know what percentage, and again, I'm only speaking for China. On these trips, they wanted to know how many of their fellow Chinese had bought in the building, so we had to have percentages for those. So I think that you have to have a team approach to this. You have to be prepared because certain cultures are more meticulous than others, and I think that you have to anticipate the questions before you go over, or before they come.
Let's do 2 more audience questions. Anybody? Yes, back there.
I have a question. Do you have, you were talking about different types of rich, very rich,
Well, we're already starting to see development sites trade at numbers that you never saw a development site trade for the number east of Park Avenue. So, I mean, I know of a development site on the Upper East Side on the 2nd Avenue corridor that's going for supposedly $800 a square foot for dirt. So they're going to have to get those kind of numbers to develop that property at that number. I know a lot of people are banking on big numbers as the 2nd Avenue subway comes. I think what Richard and Leonard said earlier, though, and Adam, about the foreign buyer really being attracted to an area that they have seen on TV or has been highly publicized is very true. So I don't think you'll see as many foreign buyers go that far east in the beginning, just like we haven't really seen them go very far west. They tend to stay central. But the 2nd Avenue subway area is already on fire. And there's a development site, number of brownstones on 82nd Street in that area that is going to, mid-block, that's going to go for over $700 a foot.
Well, at 560 West 24th Street, we just did a sale to a lady from Europe, and specifically what excited her was the fact that the subway extension from Times Square to 11th Avenue was opening at the end of the year. So I do think these infrastructure improvements are huge catalysts for major development. You're seeing it downtown in the financial district, and I imagine you're going to see it on 2nd Avenue very, very soon.
I think the High Line also obviously has brought a lot more foreign interest to West Chelsea than you would have ever seen 4 or 5 years ago.
Yes, question back there.
Oh,
it has already.
Without a doubt. We're launching the sales at 388 Bridge Street in, I don't know, Roberta, 2 weeks. And we expect to be well into the mid-teens a square foot there. I mean, it starts on the 30th floor, so the views are incredible. We're doing 2 jobs in Dumbo. Chances are we'll be coming out at $1,500 a square foot there. So, you know, if you look at particularly the Dumbo marketplace, and you look at the quality of the housing stock that's coming and the type of people who live there now, those are a lot of the same people who lived in Tribeca 5 and 10 years ago. And if Tribeca, let's say Lake Street, is at $2,700, $2,800 a square foot, then they can buy in Dumbo at $1,500 or $1,700 a square foot. That's a bargain.
Leonard, you're marketing John Bon Jovi's property in Soho. I think that's the coolest listings among you guys today, perhaps. 37 million. Any foreign buyers there, or who's looking?
I cannot confirm or decline that is the client's name. We have the foreign buyer we have is not necessarily from outside of the country, but I always look at foreign buyers as those who aren't living in New York yet, and I think there's an incredibly potent foreign buyer within the United States of America who's incredibly rich and Googleable.
That's really cryptic. So the foreign buyer is not from out of the country. That's very cryptic. I think we'll end on that note. If you guys have questions, come up and ask these guys. Thanks so much.